Despite geographical proximity and expansive trade, many Americans know little about Canada, our neighbor to the north. At almost 10 million square kilometers, Canada is the second largest country in the world by landmass, second only to Russia. Canada is composed of 10 semi-autonomous provinces and 3 territories. Its capital is Ottawa. Canada is a federal parliamentary democracy within a constitutional monarchy, which means that while Queen Elizabeth technically serves as the head of state, the British have very limited control. Most executive power is centered on the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, and legislative power is held by Parliament. Canada has a long history of colonization before Confederation, much like the United States. In 1534, Jacques Cartier planted a massive cross which read, "Long live the King of France," in what is modern-day Canada, claiming the land for King Francis I. The first English colony was founded in 1583 at St. John's, Newfoundland, by Sir Humphrey Gilbert. In the early 1600s, the French continued to expand, settling Port Royal in 1605 and Quebec City in 1608. Throughout the mid-17th century and into the 18th century, there was fighting between the British, the French, and their various indigenous allies over the beaver fur trade. In 1713, with the Treaty of Utrecht, the British gained control of Nova Scotia. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1763, ended the 7 Years' War with France, which ceded the vast majority of its territory in Canada to the British. The province of Quebec was created by British Royal Proclamation in 1763. To maintain peace, the British enacted the Quebec Act of 1774, which expanded Quebec's territory further into the present-day United States and re-established French language, Catholicism, and French civil law. The 1783 Treaty of Paris recognized the independence of the United States and ceded back the territory Britain had claimed south of the Great Lakes. After the American Revolution, several thousand English-speaking loyalists moved into the province of Quebec. To accommodate linguistic and cultural differences, the Constitutional Act of 1791 divided the province into Lower Canada, which became French-speaking and later became modern Quebec, and English-speaking Upper Canada, which later became Ontario. During the War of 1812 between Britain and the United States, much of the fighting occurred in Lower and Upper Canada. For the next several decades after the war's conclusion, hundreds of thousands of European immigrants, particularly from Britain and Ireland, began immigrating to Canada. After rebellions in 1837, the British government believed that political union and Anglicization of French Canadians would be the best way to assure peace. The Act of Union, passed in 1840, merged the two Canadas into a united province of Canada, with responsible parliamentary government. In 1867, the Constitution Act proclaimed Canadian Confederation with 4 original provinces: Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. Manitoba joined in 1870, as did British Columbia in 1871 and Prince Edward Island in 1873. The Yukon Territory was established in 1898, and Alberta and Saskatchewan became provinces in 1905. After World War I in 1919, Canada joined the League of Nations independently of Britain. Canada's independence was affirmed in 1931 with the Statute of Westminster. The final province, Newfoundland, now called Newfoundland and Labrador, was unified with Canada in 1949. Like many other industrialized nations, Canada experienced an economic boom after World War II. This, combined with the policies of a number of liberal governments, led to the creation of a new Canadian identity. On February 15, 1965, the national flag of Canada, otherwise known as the Maple Leaf flag, was adopted. The design of the flag explicitly avoided incorporating the Union Jack or fleur-de-lis in an effort to promote unity. The federal government also expanded redistribution and social welfare programs. In 1965, the Prime Minister, Lester Pearson, established the Canadian Pension Plan, which is similar to America's Social Security system. By working through the provinces, the federal government also provided publicly funded universal health care for all Canadians through the Medical Care Act of 1966. These developments, while somewhat controversial at the time, are now essential components of Canadian identity. For example, large percentages of Canadians maintain that a movement away from the public provision of healthcare would change Canada for the worse. Canada has a strong civic identity, but is quite accepting. It implemented official bilingualism in 1969, with both English and French as official national languages, and it instituted official multiculturalism in 1971. However, this is certainly not to say Canadian identity has not suffered its share of problems. Francophile Quebec has presented challenges to Canadian unity for more than 2 centuries. Within the last 50 years, these challenges have come close to separating Quebec from the rest of Canada. The awakening of the movement for sovereignty in Quebec began with the election of Jean Lesage as premier of the provincial government in 1960. Under Lesage, the provincial government took control of healthcare and educational policy away from the Catholic Church. It nationalized electricity production and successfully tried to increase the economic welfare of the Quebecois. Many see these policies as stirring up national sentiment in Quebec. From the early 1960s until about 1970, the Front de Libération du Québec used acts of violence to fight against what they perceived as Anglo-Saxon imperialism. The group lost any semblance of public support after the October Crisis in 1970, in which a British diplomat, James Cross, and the British Labour Minister, Pierre Laporte, were kidnapped, leading to Laporte's eventual death at the hands of the FLQ. In 1968, the much more moderate Parti Québécois was created by René Lévesque, which advocated for the secession of Quebec from Canada. In the interim, until the goal of secession could be achieved, the Parti Québécois fought for devolvement of power to the provinces. The party took power in 1976, and in 1977 enacted the Charter of the French Language, also known as Bill 101, which made French the exclusive official language of Quebec. In 1980, they initiated the first of 2 referenda, which sought support to begin negotiations for independence. It failed, gaining only 40% of the vote. The party's second referendum on sovereignty, in 1995, was also rejected, though by a much narrower margin.
Sorry, I got to break in on that point, Apollo 13, the no campaign that they brought back from the dead. We are ready to make now that final projection on the evening. CBC Decision Desk calling for a no victory numerically tonight. It's going to be a squeaker, maybe as much as 1 percentage point separating the 2 sides by the end of the evening, but no more than that. 96.4% of the polls. I can't remember covering an election ever, but we have to wait this long to make a projection. It gives you an indication just how close things were tonight. In the province of Quebec, more than 92% of Quebecers voting. Here's the scene at the Yes Side headquarters, the dejection on their faces of coming so close, so very, very.
There have not been any votes on secession since 1995. Despite massive student protests in the spring of 2012, which developed some separatist undertones, there is little public support for outright independence. The Parti Québécois regained power in 2012, after losing power in 2003. However, there is no indication they plan to bring up secession again for a vote. The case of Quebec raises interesting questions about the role federalism plays in the construction of national identity. As a province with a common language and a history that extends back to the 18th century, Quebec could very easily be considered a distinct nation. While Quebec has not achieved true sovereignty as a nation-state, it has certainly used the Canadian federal system to its advantage, protecting its language and culture. Essentially, it has maintained its viability as a nation-state without becoming one. Many scholars note this trend, namely, that federalism can accommodate cleavages in society, but also often perpetuates them. Interestingly, despite fairly strong provincial attachments, Canada has a broad and wide-ranging welfare system that redistributes between provinces. More money flows through the public sector in Canada than the United States, and Canadians are more supportive of state interventions. Canada can realistically be painted as the success story of federalism accommodating several nationalisms to create a civic nationalist union. In contrast to cases like the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia, Canada has for the most part avoided nationalistic violence. While it has not achieved assimilation, that need not be the end goal. Canada, it seems, has achieved a unique multicultural identity without it.